Beautiful. Welcome, friends. You are watching and listening to the SteelerFury.com Pittsburgh Steelers show. This is the biggest week we have all year. We call this our pre-draft extravaganza. We'll have a week's worth of all kinds of content about not only the NFL draft in general, but also, of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers draft. It culminates in a 2-day episode where we will recreate a Pittsburgh Steelers mock war room, where we'll go through all of the picks. We'll propose players from, offense and defense at those spots, and we'll argue about who the pick should be, and then we'll have to decide to make a pick under pressure, and then we'll go through the whole draft. We've been doing this every year for 15 years. You'd think we'd be better at it by now, but it's fun to watch us occasionally hit it big or a train wreck. That's the joy of it. But in order to get there, we have to have some other programs this week. We're going to talk at some point about the sort of top players in the draft and try to do a mock first round. We're going to maybe talk about some unheralded players with Bill Carroll, and we are going to talk about today's subject, which is the needs of the Pittsburgh Steelers and maybe some players who would fit those needs. And to do that, we have two excellent cohorts joining the show today. You will recognize, sometimes known as Smith is Smoking. Jeremy Kohlman from The Extra Point is joining us. How are you doing, Jeremy? How are you today?
Doing great, and thanks for having me back.
And making his Steeler Fury Pittsburgh Steelers show debut all the way from, Orlando, Florida tonight. But he is generally coming from Hammond, America. His name is Korey Karbowsky. He joins us. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
So Korey, you have a leg up on us. You are currently playing college football at the FCS level, which means you probably played against many of the people that we bandy about in the drafts, and you can inject some, your own personal experiences, seeing it from the sideline or knowing these guys, which is kind of a fun aspect of having you on the show. But it also means, we're going to pick on you for being a college football. No, I don't know what I was going to say. We're really glad to have you on the show. It just kind of seems like fun, but you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. So that, if you put those two factors together, you make a special guest. So I'm glad you're joining us on the show.
Glad to be here.
You say some weird stuff when the recording is going and you're trying to make it smooth, and then you're just trying to forget what you were saying in the middle of it. Like, it's a lot easier to do this when you're your age than when you're 58, like some other people are. Anyway, listen, let's we'll go with youth and beauty before age. Tell us a little bit about your take on the Pittsburgh Steelers, their current situation. So let's look at what they did in the offseason, what's come and gone, and where they sit. Are you generally optimistic or pessimistic? Let's start with that question.
I'm generally pretty optimistic. I think this is one of our better off seasons that we've had in the past 6-7 years. I think a big criticism of the Killer Bees era was that we didn't really make any splash moves, and I think we made at least an attempt at a few of them this offseason.
Yeah, it's like I have mixed feelings. Like, I think there were things that appeared as be like more of a splash move than maybe they are, but I do think that they tried at least to find some pieces that fit. Jeremy, what's your take on the same question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic too. I look at this team last year and then see where we are this year, and it's like I see a lot of upgrades. James Daniel, he's going to be an upgrade on the offensive line. Mason Cole's going to, potentially start, and if not, he's a really good backup to have. Getting a guy like Miles Jack, could have been the Jacksonville linebacker we got last year, but that would have required a trade too. Just in general, getting Akella Witherspoon back after it seemed to be he might have been weighing his options, bringing in Levi Wallace. We brought in a lot of good football players, really shored up some depth in some areas. Obviously, we'll get to the areas they didn't shore up, so to say. But I'm optimistic. I like what they added to the group, considering, we're getting Stephon Tuitt back. That's almost like a free agent signing. Getting Tyson Alualu back. I mean, shoot, he barely played last year too. So I just feel like there's a lot of pieces coming together. Just got to see if we can put it together out on the football field.
Well, you guys are, I mean, not that I'm really pessimistic, but I'm a little bit more pessimistic maybe than the average Steeler fan, I think. I think some of that is I've been through this off-season business with them for a long time now, and it's like, yeah, we're all excited to have some fresh faces, especially at positions where you feel like they had holes or they needed an upgrade. But I noticed that neither one of you mentioned Mitchell Trubisky coming in as the quarterback, which is arguably like the biggest, most important move that they made. What's your take, Corey, in terms of him as a quarterback? Do you think that moves the needle, or do you feel it's just kind of placeholder?
There were times last year where Ben was on and Ben was off. It's hard to say how much of it was on scheme and Canada's offense and what happened with. I mean, it was a mess last year. Everyone saw it. But Trubisky has an arm. He's mobile. He has the traits. It's hard to tell how much Matt Nagy might have just destroyed his development, but I think that he'll be stable at least for a year, maybe two.
Yeah, I think that's a realistic assessment. I mean, I don't know. My take is he's going to be the guy that teases you a little bit. There'll be moments where you make some plays and you think, oh, like there's hope. We can do this and that, the other. And then he'll crush your spirit a little bit with other plays. And it just sort of feels like, to me, the biggest question is how well does this fit with the style of football that Mike Tomlin likes to play? Because my sense after watching him since 2007 is one thing's consistent. He loves to play sort of a defensive attrition kind of football, field position game. He's not necessarily hiring people or getting plays called on the offensive side that are a lot of attacking. It's more getting a feel for what the other team is doing and then wearing them down, using your defense to make plays and to get field position and turn over the ball. So in order to complement that, I think you need a quarterback who is really good at making plays at the right time, who can make a clutch play for you, who can turn over the sticks on third down, who, when the game is on the line in the fourth quarter, can take you from, either being behind to the lead or from a tie game to the winning score or from a lead to putting the game away. So, Jeremy, that's the thing. You can upgrade all these other pieces, and this is even optimistically, Stephon Tuitt's going to come back, and he's going to be like the Stephon Tuitt of old. And Miles Jack is going to be better in coverage than he was the last 3 or 4 years. And Devin Bush will, bounce back a little bit more. Like even if all the optimism is fair, right? Doesn't the piece at quarterback still mean that they're missing something vital?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to preface it with this. Talk is cheap. We've heard all offseason, like the players that were at the Bills saying, oh, this guy looks great in practice. Oh, he should be getting another shot. That's great and all, but you got to prove it out on the football field. When the bolts are flying, does Mitch Trubisky look like the guy he is in practice, or does he look like the guy that we know and saw that struggled with the inconsistencies in Chicago? So definitely, I don't think he's a long-term answer. Would it be nice if he turned into one? Sure, but I think that's like a 10% chance at this point. And then obviously they didn't think enough of Mason Rudolph to let him have the job without competition. So, and let's face it, I don't think he's winning any competition anyway. But yeah, I mean, quarterback is still the big question mark for long term. No franchise guy in Pittsburgh right now.
Well, Corey, I'll give you a shot at that question before I ask you the next one. Do you think there's enough there at quarterback to win the close games at the end of the game? Because last year Ben was, I think, 6-2 or something in the fourth quarter of games where they trailed and he had the ball in his hands with a chance to take the lead. That feels like a really important part of this team that's gone now.
Yes. If I recall, he played in that kind of style with Chicago, and he was what he was. He was mediocre because Chicago relied on that elite defense, and it got them to second round of the playoffs, but never any further. I think it's unrealistic to expect him to lead you to a Super Bowl run, but he can not turn the ball over, which is a struggle, but he can not turn the ball over and just keep the offense moving how it's supposed to be moving, then I think he can be manageable. especially for a year or two. I don't see him as a long-term answer.
I think we got I think we're both on the same page in that it feels like a good move for a year or two until you find something that you want to invest in long term. And hey, if he works out and he works out better than you're expecting, even better, right?
Exactly.
He can keep Mike Tomlin's record of being a 500 or better coach. Probably he can accomplish that. So if he can do that, his tenure in Pittsburgh will be deemed a success.
All right. So before the draft and before any more free agency moves, because I'm sure there'll be some later free agency moves to fill whatever holes there are. But before all that exists, but assuming that they're going to add a piece or two in the draft that will work out for them, right? What's your take on this team's record for next year in your mind right now? I'll start with you, Jeremy.
I mean, 9-8, 8-9, I mean, in the AFC only got harder with all the other offseason moves that teams did. Deshaun Watson's in Cleveland. That makes the division that much harder. How many games Deshaun Watson's going to play at the beginning of the year? Still up in the air. Still makes that tough down the stretch when we have to play them. I mean, Russell Wilson now in Denver. You've got 4 teams in the AFC West that can make a playoff run. Theoretically, you've got 4 in the North that can make a run. Maybe 2 out of the South, 2 out of the East. Boy, I see a lot of teams getting left out. So you can only take 7. So there's going to be some good teams that don't make it to the playoffs this year. It's just a numbers game.
Sure, Corey, what's your take?
Exactly what that 8-9, 9-8. I feel like if we got to 10, it'd be a surprise, and I feel like if we got to 7 wins, it'd be a surprise. Equally, I feel like the defense is better, but like you said, we aren't going to go 6-2 in close games. It just won't happen.
Yeah.
I feel like we'll probably drop 2 more of those, maybe get blown out 1 more time, something like that, and be right around the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I would say I look at those the iffy things, right? So Stephon Tuitt coming back and playing like Stephon Tuitt, Devin Bush, the stuff that I mentioned before. And I sort of feel like it's probably a 30% chance that all works out to some degree, and maybe more like a 70% chance that it doesn't really work out that well for you. So I'm a little worried that a defense where you're built around this linebacker play in the middle of the field linebacker play in the middle of the field has been a problem since the day Ryan Shazier got hurt. It was a problem before Ryan Shazier, after the previous guy left. Sorry for spacing on his name right now. That should have been the defensive MVP of the league in 2004. You'll have to help me, Jeremy. Not Larry Foote, the other guy.
James Farrier.
James Farrier, thank you. After James Farrier declined until Ryan Shazier, it was a serious problem for the Steelers. After Ryan Shazier got hurt, it's been a serious problem for the Steelers, this middle of the field defense. So I feel like everyone is expecting the defense to be lights out next year. I'm going to be surprised if they're better than a fringe top 10 defense next year. Even though I love the addition of Levi Wallace, I think Miles Jack is a great name to add, and there's a lot of talent there. But he's exhibited some real problems in coverage, which is the thing that even when you're playing more of a downhill style and you're better at that and a good tackler, you can be exploited the way the NFL works. They'll just move you around until you have to cover somebody in space, and you'll be shown for what you are. So with all that said, I think the defense is a little worse maybe than it was 2 years ago when the Steelers went 500 basically with nobody at quarterback. So I feel like the quarterback is maybe a little bit better than that. It's a long way of saying I think six wins or maybe even 5 is a real possibility. I think 7 or 8 is probably where we're at, but I'm a little bit on a game or two lower than maybe you guys are. I'd be very surprised if they end up 9-8 to keep Mike Tomlin's record alive. But it's certainly possible, especially if you hit it big in a couple of draft picks. And to that end, we probably should talk about the needs for the Steelers draft, because that's why I brought you here. And you're like, why haven't we talked about that? It's already like, half an hour in. The needs for the Steelers, Korey, and for you right now, what would you say in kind of a priority order? What comes to mind? The top, say 2 or 3 or 8 needs for the Steelers right now.
I feel like I have to start with slot receiver. I mean, we're very thin. I think we have 2.5 NFL receivers right now. You got Claypool, Johnson, and kind of Anthony Miller. So slot receivers 1. I think the quarterback, maybe a developmental guy, that's up there, top 2, top 3. I really think we have a need for a slot corner. I don't think Cam Sutton's a slot corner. I would be happy with taking one early. Then edge depth, Tuska and Avery Johnson aren't really inspiring. A swing tackle to challenge Chuxton Moore. And strong safety, that's a big one. Don't even have one. I would assume they would address it before the draft, but standing right now, strong safety is a big need.
Yeah. How about you, Jeremy?
Yeah, Korey hit that last one. That's my first one. I mean, shoot, we have no one that we can trot out right now and expect to pay just average level safety play at strong safety right now. I mean, if we have to throw Miles Killebrew out there, good Lord, people are going to make him look like just bad, I mean, so safety is a big need for me. I agree with Korey. 2.5, maybe 3 receivers we can rely on this roster. And I mean, that's, even putting faith in Anthony Miller, who we haven't seen much out of. So, I mean, I feel like we could go after 2 this draft, 2 dogs, 1 bone type mentality. Get a guy who can play outside and a guy, like Korey said, we really need a slot guy that's going to come in and replace what Juju did or just be an upgrade there. And then just linebacker depth. I mean, we didn't stay healthy last year. We saw how that worked out. It's like I don't even like our backups now or whatever. It's like we have got to get someone who can bring some pass rush juice off the edge, and we've got to bring an athletic linebacker in to complement the rest of the defense in the middle. A lot of teams exploit Pittsburgh for, honestly, the past 2 decades in the middle when we haven't had a Ryan Shazier out there, who at least has the speed to keep up there. It'd be great to get a guy who can actually be adept in coverage and make some plays on the balls, because our guys just see ball, chase ball, see ball, chase ball. We don't really keep up.
Yeah. Well, I can't argue with either one of you. I will say, what is the Steelers' biggest need right now going into the draft? More draft picks, because it just feels like there's way more needs than there are available picks. At least they have 7. There was some doubts they were going to get that 7th pick from Kansas City, so at least we got that part.
I forgot backup running back too.
Oh, yeah.
Snell.
I'm very glad you said that. Yep. that Najee goes down, we're in a world of hurt.
Yeah,
I think one thing people don't realize about Snell, though, is that you have to replace him on basically every special teams. I feel like that's why he stuck around so long. And then McFarland. So, yeah,
I don't have a whole lot of faith in what any of them are doing as running backs.
No,
we can debate what their usefulness is as far as special teams, but yeah, you're right. It's like in their minds, they gotta, if they don't replace Benny Snell with somebody who's going to contribute on special teams at least as well as he has, then any tie is going to go to Snell, right? So that's the way that works. I'm with you on the nickel corner or the nickel player. Like the way the Steelers like to play the nickel, like Mike Hilton was sort of perfect for them. And it made a total mystery as to why they weren't more proactive about trying to lock him up. And that in fact, they kept sort of toying with him and signing him to these extended rights deals where he didn't really get anything for being a starter till they absolutely had to pay him something, and then the moment that he could hit free agency, he was out the door. I don't blame him at all for doing that, but the thing about him was he had actually maybe more safety skills. He had slot corner size and safety skill set, And they used him at three levels. He's rushing or playing, run blitzes. He is covering slot guys. He is, dropping to the deep third from a slot position. That's kind of stuff that not everybody is experienced doing that, and not everyone is good at it, even if they have a chance to do it all. So to me, I think that's a huge need. It would be a piece that they would help them get back to where they were, a couple of years ago, the thing they really missed last year. In my thinking, that might actually be a strong safety in the way that the NFL currently works, because you're in that nickel so often that you need somebody that has to have the physicality and be able to play against the run, but also can cover anyone that lines up in the slot, right? So I think I've been identifying that as one of the biggest needs. Wide receivers, an obvious one. They just don't even have bodies there. And if you're signing a strong safety or drafting a strong safety to be your nickel corner, you have to sign another safety as well, or you have to have somebody that can, fit in that role of, adding to the mix when you go to dime, some dime player, whether it's a safety or a undersized linebacker or something like that. So I think all that stuff's big. Edge depth, you guys both mentioned, I completely agree with. Backup running back for sure. Although, with all the other needs, do I see spending a draft pick on that? Boy, that's tough. But I feel like those are all really, really important needs. The one thing or two things that you guys didn't mention, I think the Steelers need a right tackle. They need somebody that is actually suited to a power run offensive front. Their running back, regardless of the lip service that the offensive coordinator says about his offense, the running back appears to be Najee Harris way more comfortable in and successful in a power run game than he is trying to weed his way to the outside and make a one cut up field. It just doesn't seem to be his game. So since you're not going to play a lot of outside zone, I think you need a bigger, more powerful at the point of attack right tackle than Chooks. So for my money, right tackle specifically is need bigger. I mean, usually you're like, wow, we really need a left tackle. They're hard to find. To me, I think you need a right tackle. I like the progress of Dan Moore. I also don't see him moving to right tackle in a power run offense. So I view that as a need. And the other thing no one mentioned is, yes, you need a third receiver and you need somebody to play wide receiver in the slot. But I could make an argument that this team might be better off playing a lot of two tight end sets. I'm not really a big fan of the other tight ends on the roster besides Freiermuth. And I think Freiermuth is sort of I would call him a 1B tight end in the NFL. He's somebody that gives you a lot of effort blocking and is very dependable red zone target. But I think you need a seam threatener who's also a decent blocker or even a plus blocker. I feel like that would make a huge difference for this offense rather than trying to have Ray McLeod or a player of that ilk and run the ball behind him. So, I mean, when I say they need more picks, I'm not joking. Like, that's everything. We just named every position on the team, strangely enough, except for interior offensive line, which last year people thought was a big weakness. So maybe they got that part straightened out. So let's talk about players that might fit for the things that we're talking about. And it could be a player that they could target in the first round. It could be a player that, even though it's a big need, that maybe there's some depth where they could get it later. I'll start with you, Corey. What do you think in terms of players that fit some of the needs that you brought up?
So this is a bit of a later pick, probably 5th, 6th round, but Steelers fans hate every single time they see their linebacker all the way outside the hash guarding slots. And Mike Rose has done that for the last 3 years of his career. He's a big linebacker who goes out wide. He'll go and cover up the seam. He drops deep in Tampa too. He doesn't really get that much weight behind his pads, but he'll come downhill, take on blocks, and he just really fits what the Steelers like to do.
Yeah, Jeremy, how about you?
So that's a late round guy. I'll go first round guy just to address the glaring hole in strong safety right now. I mean, I really like Lewis Cine out of Georgia. He's a phenomenal athlete. He comes down and lays the wood. He makes plays on the ball. He checks off all the boxes in what could be, a really good safety for the next rookie contract and beyond. That fills a big hole. Corey, like you said, I kind of expect them to bring in someone here before the start of the draft, or just re-sign Terrell Edmonds if need be. But, he's regarded as probably one of the best safeties in this class. I doubt Kyle Hamilton's going to be in range. And like Will said, I don't want to trade up because we don't have draft picks to do it. I think Lewis Cine could be a pick at 20, or even if there's just a small targeted trade down just to pick up that extra maybe 4th round pick or something to use on another need. I really like what Lewis Cine brings to the table, and his ability to be in there and kind of that big nickel look too, with his physicality, but still being able to keep up with slot receivers. I just think he's a home run pick, just a piece that could come in, play day one on defense with a role. So
let me throw this question to you. I'll say, talking about nickel corner, or in this case, a versatile safety to be your nickel corner. Are you more willing to pay early, like either overpay at 20 or move up in the second to get Daxton Hill or Jalen Petrie, or is there somebody that you feel more comfortable with later than spending that early pick? I'll start with you, Corey.
I would feel comfortable taking either one of them at 20, but a guy that I really like later is Nick Cross. He played a lot more high instead of the slot at Maryland, but he's a real sparky guy, like real great tester. He has Tomlin connections already, roomed with his son at Maryland. I could really see that being a 3rd or 2nd round pick.
Well, he's a Steeler already then.
You get the endorsement of Dino. He's got a good chance to come in. I'll throw a later round guy out there, Russ Yeast of Kansas, who was a player that played at the Shrine Bowl. He's one of those guys that's sort of a tweener, corner and safety. But I saw him, if you think about what I talked before about playing at 3 levels, he made a lot of plays in the backfield. He was able to not only cover receivers very tight in those one-on-one drills where the defensive backs are often exposed, because that's more coverage than they're really asked to do in a game usually, when it's just them against air and a receiver with a two-way go and all that business. He was good at that at the practices at the Shrine Bowl, and you could see it also in games. But the other thing he's able to do that not every slot player in this draft is able to do is he could play a 2-high safety for you and be extremely comfortable doing that, or drop into that third, 1/3 safety that the Steelers like to deploy sometimes over top of a blitz. So he's very, very good at that, at turning and flipping his hips and going into space, making plays deep from an alignment that's pre-snap showing he's a slot player. So I like that a lot about him. Here's a question, Jeremy. Do you think how would you feel about drafting? It's an elite edge class. There's more guys at the top of this class who I think are elite edge players than we normally have in 2 years of the draft, maybe more this year. So even though it's not the biggest need, and Alex Highsmith has been a serviceable starter, how would you feel about drafting a Boye Mafe? There's a guy that will be available at 20. Is it worth trying to do that, even though it isn't addressing the biggest need?
If you think he can be a difference-making pass rusher at this level, absolutely. I mean, he's a guy that's tested phenomenally. Little stiff in the lower half, but I mean, he can bend really well. He can get after the quarterback. I mean, those guys are, always valuable. If you can get a guy like that, you think he can make a difference starting day one, absolutely. I mean, another guy who I'd love to take is David Ojabo. I mean, that guy was looking to be top 10 pick, and tears his Achilles, or I think it was Achilles. I love that kid. I mean, all year long, I'm in the heart of Big Ten country, so Michigan's getting thrown on the dang TV every week. I'm watching Hutchinson go off, and I'm like, Ojabo is just as good, and he brings effort just like Hutchinson does. He's got moves. I would love to like snap David Ojabo if the opportunity was there. I mean, he's probably going to slip out of the first round, So, I would love to grab a guy like that with juice or whatever to be across TJ Watt for the next, 5-6 years. That'd be incredible.
Well, I remember that in the Steelers board mock that year, I took Simmons, despite the fact that, he wasn't going to play for a year. And the Steelers traded up to get Bush instead. And it's like, I feel like the investment in Simmons might have been worthwhile. Corey, what do you think of this idea of edge? Do you think Steelers Nation of fans would go apeshit over that, or like in a bad way? What do you think about that idea?
They'd lose their mind, but the thing is you can never have enough good pass rushers. Like if you have Highsmith, you have a lethal. It's like, think about how it was with Melvin Ingram for those first 2-3 weeks. You would have a lethal 3-man rotation, which matters. It matters having fresh guys coming in. So Steelers fans would be pissed. No one would be happy except for maybe 1% of the fan base. But it would help them win games, even if they wouldn't like it.
So of the needs that we have identified, Corey, what else other than what we talked about in the first round? You see a receiver there at 20, maybe?
I feel like there's enough good prospects in the second round that I would rather go mostly elsewhere. Like a guy like Sky Moore in the second round, maybe. Like he's George Pickens if he lands there. At 20, I feel like might just be a little too rich. It'd be a good player we'd draft, but I feel like the needs there outweigh the value you could possibly get in the second.
Got it. Jeremy, you agree with this?
Yeah, I think there's receivers in every round of this draft that I like. I like both SMU wide receivers. I like Danny Gray. He's a big time speedster, but he's not a small guy. He's 6 feet tall. I actually really like Reggie Roberson. I thought he might come out in last year's draft, but got hurt late, decided to stay, got hurt again. But I'm very high on both those guys. That there are always receivers that you can get that can make a difference or whatever. I'd rather spend our premium picks on for sure big needs, so to say.
But I'll play devil's advocate though. I think the Steelers. I actually like what Deontay Johnson brings. There's potential in Claypool that I've been really disappointed in what he's done and the sort of traits that he's shown that I think are hard to correct. I feel like they actually need a number one receiver in a way. They need a guy that at least has the possibility of being a number one. And I'm not sure, although I think there's receivers in every round, I'm not sure there's a number one receiver in every round, especially to make it more difficult, one that fits with the other two guys, right? So I know, Corey, you talked about maybe you like the idea of moving Chase Claypool to the slot, but that would mean adding somebody who's a home run hitter. So I'll just throw out the two names that I think are kind of in contention for that in my mind early. That would be George Pickens from Georgia and Christian Watson from North Dakota State. So what do you think about this idea of adding a top-end receiver, even though it's more draft capital than you'd like to spend?
Kind of feels like you're giving Trubisky a bit too nice of a pair of keys there. But I feel like once we do eventually get the guy, I feel like that would be that'd be an outstanding receiving core. You have a guy who can win off the press with Deontay Johnson. Watson's a burner who can really stick out of his routes, and Pickens is a contested catch machine. I've talked to you about it with Claypool. I think his best fits running inside fades, seams, and short drags. Keep it simple. Let him get in the blocking game. I feel like when he's stuck out there on the outside, he just can't get off the jam. He gets ran off into the sideline. I feel like you give him more room to operate in the slot, but it's Canada. Who knows what he does, and didn't seem to show much interest in that last year. But if we did that, once we do get the quarterback that can really play with those shiny new toys, I feel like it'd be an outstanding receiving core.
Yeah, in a way, Jeremy, I feel like the best thing that could happen this season would be to find out that your offensive coordinator can't cut it. And before you ruin a new quarterback coming in, you've already found out that, the Matt Canada experiment is over. Yes, maybe the second best thing would be finding out that Matt Canada is pretty good. But what's your take on this though? The two receivers that I mentioned, or perhaps another that you think might be available from 20 onward.
Well, I'm a big Christian Watson fan. I really like what he brings to the table. And honestly, I think once he gets to an NFL team and gets under some NFL tutelage, I think he's only going to get better. But he's such a awesome ball of clay to start working with already. 6'4", runs a 4.36, good hands, quick in and out of his cuts. I mean, a lot to like there, obviously. If Chris Olave is there, I think it'd be tough to pass on him because he does so many little things right already. He's not as physical as I'd like him to be, but he is so quick.
Understatement.
Off the line. Yeah. He is so quick off the line and finds a way to get behind corners. That's such a valuable trade. It'd be really hard to pass on a guy like him, considering Deontay Johnson's contract is looming as well. He wants 5 years, $90 million. We'll see. I don't mind the idea of adding a wide receiver. I just think it's a deep draft for wide receivers. So,
yeah, I get that part. I feel like somebody who's really an outlier. I have a little birdie tells me that Pickens is the Steelers guy. Now I don't know where he's perceived to go. If he's somebody that they would draft at 20, or if he's a second round kind of a player for them, or a trade up in the second round or whatever. I've heard that he's a guy. So just that makes me think they are thinking along these similar lines that they kind of need an alpha dog at receiver. And I also feel like the great thing about that is it would take a lot of pressure off of Deontay Johnson to not necessarily have to carry the offense on every third down and, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, just real quick, I will throw some 2 cents in here because I've been kind of thinking about the past 2 days. I think we're going to see a historic run on wide receivers before pick 45, and especially in the first round. And I think a lot of this is because Jacksonville screwed up the wide receiver market. I think all these teams are going to want to get wide receivers on round one deals with a fifth-year option. It's one less year that I don't have to pay this guy $25 million if he becomes, the next great wide receiver. I think you're going to see a run on wide receivers, edge rushers late because they want to get those guys on a fifth-year option too, and potentially all the quarterbacks, that we could get into. But yeah. I really think you're going to see a big run on wide receivers just because of that. They want to get these guys on that option where they have a fifth-year option to pick it up and not have to pay them an exorbitant amount of money.
It kind of doesn't bode well for the Steelers' way of doing business where they try to draft young players who they feel like they can develop under their first contract, because now you're living in a league where if you develop that guy, he's going to be either gone or the power of the franchise tag is now really lower than ever because players are just deciding they don't really want to deal with it. They'll just sit out or they'll force a trade or whatever. So yeah, in a way, it feels like I would want to draft more polished players. I like young players and I like players with upside, but I would prefer that person has upside and is more or less ready to play. Hard to do both for those kind of top 100 picks because you're going to lose them. It seems more likely. So Corey, you mentioned one of the reasons for being more reluctant to draft a wide receiver early is that there's so much depth at the position. So let's approach this a different way. What are the draft positions that you feel like that are Steelers needs, but that have very limited pool for the draft? In other words, who they should be more concerned that they're not going to be able to get around to later?
Mm-hmm. So like we said, there's slot cornerbacks. There's two, and if you want to throw like some safeties where you think you can play him down, like I said with Nick Cross, that's a guy that could maybe go down. But I feel like slot corner, you're going to have to go early if you want one. So maybe they're committed to Sutton, maybe not. Corners also, they have a terrible history of drafting corners, but I'm not really too moved by the cornerback class once you get out of the second round.
Wow. Yeah, I feel the opposite. I feel like the cornerback class is as good as I ever recall it. I look at it, guys, like I rank cornerbacks down to 100 in this class. And I don't bother getting into ranking a guy if I don't think he has a chance to at least be an undrafted free agent and play in the league. I just feel like looking at the guys in even the 70 or 80 range, they seem like guys that have size and speed and quicks and have some ability to play, like they're, some track record. So I feel like outside corner, there seems to be a lot more guys than usual. There are, by the way, someone asked me the other day, there are 21 cornerbacks in this class who are over 6 feet, who vertical jumped over 35 inches, and ran a 4 in the 4.5s. I mean, I have 31-inch arms. Like, there's 21 guys that sort of fit that prototype outside corner build. It's like, I don't remember there being more than 5 guys like that in the draft class. So just saying that. I don't know. Jeremy, what do you think about this question I asked as far as where is depth to kind of fall off the table in this class?
I think high-level safety play. I think there's, a few guys who are going to be able to give you that high-level play, and then there's just a bunch of guys. Who's going to be a true free safety in this class? I see a lot of guys who can come down and play the run, but not cover. I see a lot of guys who can cover, but are hesitant to come down and play the run. So, the handful of guys who I think can be a kind of a complete package total player. I mentioned Lewis Seen, Kyle Hamilton's going to be a, top 10 pick. Nick Cross is a guy, but I mean, right there, it's like 3 fingers are down already. There's not many more I'd consider true complete prospects there. So especially if you're looking for a starter, like the way, Pittsburgh could be looking for one right now, the pickings could be thin. So, I mean, Nick Cross could be a 2nd-round pick for Pittsburgh, as we're in other years, if they're, safety class a little more rounded out, he might slip to the 3rd. But I feel like if they want a guy like Nick Cross, and he's the guy who has been talked about as being on the rise here because of his athletic profile, I feel like, a 2nd-round pick is where they're going to have to take him if they want him.
I feel like there are 3 position groups that stand out in my mind that are all needs for the Steelers, where the pool just drops off after the very beginning. The first is a defensive lineman who's capable of playing multiple roles. So somebody, I think they would love to have somebody who can play nose tackle for them, who can play some snaps at 5 tech and can be a pass rusher or nickel downs. There's like 3 or 4 guys in this draft class that can do that. That's it. So if you want that guy, if Stephen Tenuta is not coming back and you're already getting that inkling before you go into the draft, and maybe they just haven't said it yet because they're afraid to tip their hand. But if they're looking for that guy, that's going to be the pick at 20, because you're either going to pick, whichever Georgia guy makes it to 20, or if neither of them makes it, you're drafting Travis Jones, or, there's not that many more guys at that position. The second one is running back. I feel like the top couple of guys at running back, even if you're looking for somebody that's just a change of pace to Najee Harris, that isn't, identical to him, or more of a, bigger back that doesn't really have a lot of juice. If you want a guy with juice that's going to be pretty good on 3rd downs and could step in for Najee Harris for a while, there's, in my opinion, there's not that many guys in this draft class. I think first couple of guys go off the board, and then you're looking at a pile of, guys that aren't going to excite you too much.
I'm actually a fan of the running backs. So
yeah, see, there you go. We have a different take on that one as well. Yeah.
I say that there's a lot of guys on day 3 that I think that could make fantastic backup running backs.
Yeah, well, day 3. Yeah, what I'm saying, if you're looking for somebody that, I don't know, even that has juice, like there's just, for instance, there's not that much speed in this running back class. Last year you had, for the first name I can think of, going into the draft, you had Elijah Mitchell, and I was like, you would be wise to draft a guy like that earlier than you think, because there's not that many guys like him that run that fast, or that are running backs capable of being a durable running back who have, who are real runners and not just like gadget players who also have that kind of speed. I think last year there were only 2 or 3 guys like that who weren't, picked in the top 35 picks or something. So that's always an issue for me. But yeah, guys that I like, okay, yeah, there's 25 of them. There'll be guys undrafted in the class. I'm sure that all three of us will be like, oh, that guy's pretty good. Korey, go ahead. You have a slightly different take.
So, I mean, there's guys like once you get past the second round, which I feel like, honestly, I feel like the range where we could start taking guys in the fourth. So, like, I mean, in these two drafts we've done, I've taken Rachaad White twice. I'm a big fan of his game. There's a chance he doesn't go in the third. But, like, Hassan Haskins, he's kind of like, I see a lot of Najee in his play style. Abram Smith, he's a dynamic runner. Ty Chandler, Keontae Ingram's kind of like how McFarland was looked at coming out. I feel like there's a lot of guys in 4, 5, 6, 7. Isaiah Pacheco.
A guy
there's
I like.
A lot of guys. Yeah. There's a lot of guys that I feel like could do what the Steelers wanted much better than Snell and McFarland can do.
Yeah, well, that's a low bar, but yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, for sure. And I know I mentioned there were two positions that the Steelers needed where things really dropped off, but now I'm going to have to think what the other one was. Let's see. It was I mentioned running back, and I mentioned the
versatile defensive lineman.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's linebackers who can either cover or be all around linebackers. So in other words, if you're looking for a replacement for Devin Bush in this draft class, that feels very skinny to me. And I feel like if they draft another linebacker to add to the mix with, the question mark that is Buddy Johnson and the thing we know about the rest of the depth that they have, what their strong suit or not strong suit is, I feel like you got to draft a guy that you can trust in coverage. And I 100% agree with a guy like Mike Rose. I also like Devin Harper out of Oklahoma State in that role, because otherwise because it's so thin, I think you're paying a premium price for Troy Anderson, who's going to go like 3 rounds earlier than everybody thinks he's going to go.
Going to go round 2. I'll call it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's an outside chance he goes 1. I mean, that it's like there just aren't that many guys at that size who are that quick. And he barely scratched the surface of playing linebacker. I mean, like, I don't think he's got more than 2 years of trying to read blocks and trying to figure out how to deal with blockers. Mostly they were just like, chase the ball sideline to sideline and cover if you're asked from coverage, but they didn't really ask him to like sift through the trash and make plays in the hole. And so maybe a team looks at him and says, I can teach him that, but I can't teach the other guys the other stuff that he can do. So I just feel like even Brandon Smith, who looks like a first-round pick, he looked like Micah Parsons in 2020, and he looked like an undraftable, unsignable player in last year's tape. I think that guy gets drafted 2 or 3 rounds earlier than people think, because there's just no one like that, a guy that has that kind of athletic profile and whatever. So what's your take on that, Jeremy, in terms of the skinniness of the linebacker who can cover?
Yeah, I feel like if you do that, it's got to be a day 1 or day 2 guy, because I don't see many guys on day 3 that can do it. Korey mentioned Mike Rose. He's a guy that I like. I like Jamarco Jackson late. He's a converted safety. He can run. He can cover a little bit. He brings some pop when he tackles. But I mean, yeah, all the guys who, we would want to replace Devin Bush with, are the Chad Mumas, the Quay Walkers, the Channing Tyndalls, the Troy Andersons. It's like those guys are all going on day 2 because they are, they tested out of this world, even Darian Beavers, at 6'3", like 250 something, he ran a very good 40 time. Yep. He can get after it. And he actually looked pretty adept dropping and covering at the Senior Bowl practices. He got his hands in passing lanes. So, I mean, if we want a guy like that, it's going to have to be early, because it's not going to be late. You would hope you strike gold on a Mike Rose or DeMarco Jackson and stuff, but those guys are more question marks than those day 1 and day 2 guys. Yeah, and Korey, I would say also that the linebacker who can keep you can stay on the field and keep your base on the field is another thing that the NFL seems to be moving to. And so anybody that allows you to do that seems to help. Anybody besides Mike Rose that you have on your in your sights that might fit that role?
I mean, there's an undersized guy like JoJo Domon. There's another guy, San Diego State linebacker, who I only came across recently, Segun Alubi. He's a really fluid runner, a little bit undersized, but really fluid runner, throws his body around. I mean, then there's guys like Chance Campbell, tested well, still have some room and coverage, but I mean, there's a lot of Lawrence Timmons, Vince Williams types in this draft late, which is just not what they're really looking for. It's hard to afford having those guys on the field now.
I mean, the alternative for an inside linebacker for the Steelers is they could sign someone who is a very good pass rusher, who's also a good linebacker. And to me, I've two guys that come to mind right away are James Houston of Jackson State, who was a inside off-ball linebacker for Florida and was actually pretty good at it. He was on the second rotation for them, played frequently and did very well at that role, and then transferred to Jackson State and became an edge rusher, which I don't think is his future in life. Even though he was very adept at it, I feel like he's a blitzing linebacker who's also got great instincts and is able to make plays downhill. The practices that I saw at the NFLPA Bowl and even in the game of the Shrine Bowl, you just see a guy who was like the first guy to react, on the second level and gets to where he's going in a hurry because he's a great athlete and arrives with bad intentions, as FC would say. I like that guy. And the other guy I like that, he's a fifth-year senior, so he's a little bit older than the Steelers' typical prospect, but this is a weird draft where you have a lot of those kinds of guys, and he's probably going to be available on late day 3 is Cameron Good from Cal. But Cameron Good is like one of the most productive linebackers in the draft. If you look at his sacks, tackles for loss, plays in the passing game, forced turnovers, he matches up with anybody in the game, and was very productive as both an edge rusher and as an outside linebacker off ball, covering guys, doing all kinds of stuff. He even played a little bit inside and as an inside pass rusher, so on the line. So I feel like you get a versatile guy like that, he's got a good chance to make your roster as a backup linebacker. And if you can back up both edge and the off-ball crew like a la Lawrence Timmons, there's a good chance for you to find a spot for yourself on the team. So those are guys.
Could I throw one more guy in? That a guy like Damon Clark? He was my linebacker 3 before the whole spinal fusion thing happened. That's a guy in round 3 that could easily come in year 2 and be better than Bush and Jack at what they're doing.
Yeah, I think he might. I mean, what I hear, he might last longer than that. I think this, like the medicals for a couple of guys in this draft class that people really like. Damon Clark is one of them. The other one would be Carson Strong. That the medicals are so not good that it might be a situation like Trace Smith last year, where a player that everybody has very highly rated somehow lasts until day 3 because teams are just afraid of the possibilities of what might happen there. And it made worse for Damon Clark by the fact that he's pretty much out guaranteed for a whole season. So, but I agree with you. Like I found him to be a really intriguing player, and he was sort of my idea of like a value all around linebacker that would be available after some of the other guys went off. But so Jeremy, where does that leave us? Any of the other positions of need where there was a player you had in mind that we didn't get to?
Well, you kind of brought up defensive line. If for some reason we don't think Stephon Tuitt's the guy, a guy I would love to replace him with is Logan Hall from Houston. 6'6", 290, just total bull in the china shop. And man, if you can get him with some coaching, I think he could be all pro, kind of like JJ Watt was, just total terror, being very hard to block type of player. I think he's got that type of potential. So really like Logan Hall. If we want a guy with experience who can kind of do the 3-4 defensive end stuff and nose tackle, I like Fedarian Mathis out of Alabama. I remember watching that kid in high school thinking, man, this kid is built to play in a 34 defensive front. Because, even then he was 6'4", 290, and he was doing stuff on the edge, inside, shaded over the nose. So that's a guy I've liked even before the season started. So I think both of those guys would be nice pickups on day 2 if we are that concerned about our defensive line. That's kind of the big question mark, like you said. How concerned are we? So
right. Well, I thought that Montravius Adams, did I get the name right?
Yeah.
I thought that he did well at what he is, which is kind of a one gap nose tackle type. And Alo, before he got hurt 2 years ago, I thought was outstanding. In the early part of that season, he was fantastic. After he came back from the knee injury, he wasn't really the same player. He was a little better than that last year before the second injury, but now this is 2 lower leg injuries and he's 35. So I feel like between that and the Stephon Tuitt situation, I could make a very strong argument for if the value works out and you have a spot in your draft where you can spend a pick on a player that can give you some snaps, can two gap a little bit better than Adams can, or than some of their other defensive line players can do, I'd be into doing that. I already mentioned Cameron Good is one of my most underrated players, but the guy that blows my mind is Timmy Horn from Kansas State, who was great at Charlotte. If you go back and watch the Alex Highsmith film, if you're somebody that when the Steelers drafted him, you went back and watched Charlotte's defense. They had 3 players on that defense that I thought were hardcore NFL players, which for Charlotte was amazing. Highsmith was one of them. Ben DeLuca, the safety, is now in the league. And Timmy Horn is the third guy. It was very sort of under, you play at Charlotte, nobody's really noticing you most of the time. But even Kansas State is another school where sort of your reputation goes to die because you're not considered, like you're playing in a Power 5 conference, but for a lesser team, that's a hard sell for you don't get a lot of attention that way, right? But Timmy Horn is huge. He tested like Jordan Davis, really. I mean, he's almost as big and tested almost as well. So I feel like he's available 6 rounds later. That's somebody that I want to put on my football team. I look at him and I think he's very successful, but he isn't even really maximizing his get off and his leverage. I feel like, in the old days, you put that guy in the hands of John Mitchell for a year or two, and you're going to come up with somebody who is an absolutely outstanding defensive lineman. So I could buy that. That's my 2 cents. I probably will mention this week, in all the weeks of draft shows, I will probably mention Cameron Good and Timmy Horn on every show. So just those of you listening, I apologize in advance. Corey, any other players who fit positions that we felt was a need?
So I feel like a guy like Andrew Stuber. He's a Michigan right tackle this year. I feel like he could play 4 positions on the line. The only place I wouldn't feel comfortable putting in is left tackle. He took center snaps. He did reasonably well in them for some guy who played right tackle his entire career. I feel like he can play left guard, right guard. He's a really strong anchor. He's a big guy. He didn't test crazy, but he moves well. Real strong punch, clean feet. He's just one of those guys on film you really never see get beat. Could fit in almost anywhere.
Yeah. We didn't really talk too much about, despite the fact of me saying right tackles were really vital. Jeremy, who would you like to see for a right tackle for the Steelers?
Kind of in the same line Corey is, Jamari Sawyer from Georgia is another guy who's very versatile, who can play, even left tackle in a pinch. You wouldn't want him there super long. But, I mean, he's a guy that can come in and fulfill that utility lineman role. I mean, that role to be that, 6th or 7th offensive lineman on game day is massive, considering, how at any point one of your starters could go down and you need a replacement level player to go in there and give you good snaps. So he's one of my guys. I feel like he'll probably be a late day 2, early day 3 pick.
I'll tell you this, Jeremy. I think last year's Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line, that Sawyer would have been the best left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, and right tackle on that team. I'm not exaggerating. He played I believe he actually played all 5 positions while he was at Georgia. I know he played center in a game and he did really well. He was their backup center always, but he was just too valuable to them elsewhere to do that. But it's like, man, that guy in the playoff game was dominating at left tackle against an elite top 5 pass rusher, and then moved to right guard, and they started running the football behind him, and to great success as well. So I feel like that's a really good choice. There's a couple of guys. I mean, I feel like right tackle is one of those positions that's a little bit overlooked. Like if the league as a whole, the mindset is this guy can't be your left tackle, then they tend to devalue those players a lot. They start kicking them inside to guard, or but I feel like, if you're a power team, finding a right tackle ought to be fairly easy in this draft. But a guy I like, sort of late too in the process, is Luke Tenuta from Virginia Tech. I don't know if he's a player that has a ton of upside, but I love his ability to play in space and play in the run game and in the screen game, which I think could be huge for the Steelers. He is the best that I saw in this class at tackle, at getting out off the line of scrimmage and finding guys and actually, getting, not just getting to them, but finishing them when he gets there. It's players can move, but not all of them can track someone while they're on the move and make that play. I feel like it's a really underrated offensive line skill, and it's more likely to find it in guards and centers. To find it in a tackle who's got, is over 320 pounds or whatever he is, and is able to do that, I feel like that's a really choice. And then, if you're going to take a flyer, Bam Olaseni from Utah is a player that super raw, didn't grow up with the game because he's from London, but I feel like the last game he played, the last couple of games he played were the best games he played in college football. And much like Boye Mafe, I feel like those are two guys that you can see the arc, everything started to come together. In the week of practice in the All-Star game gave them a lot of confidence, and also they even got better. They got better playing against better players and being coached at that level. And I feel like that's a guy that he might even be, good enough to play left tackle for you someday. But his ability with as a huge human being to move people in the run game is a pretty pretty delicious skill. I guess I'll say that. So just we've talked about a bunch of needs. We've talked about a bunch of players. You guys are great. I'll give you just a last word to wrap up your take on the stuff we've been talking about. Anything that we missed? I'll start with you, Corey.
I want to say this because I've been seeing it in a lot of places. The new flavor of the month is to make the Steelers draft Desmond Ritter. And I'm one of those guys, and I'd be really upset if it happened. He's one of those guys. He has great footwork. He's a great leader. I saw the throws in the pro day. Those didn't show up all that much on film. He also, this is my main reason for worry, is that when guys are inconsistent because of the throwing motion, he's an elongated throwing motion, elongated throwing motion, and something with his flick. It's the reason for his inaccuracy. His footwork's perfect, but that plagued a guy like Tim Tebow. That's a hard fix. It's a much harder fix than a footwork. So that's one of those guys where we took him at 20. I'd be pretty upset. It doesn't feel like real high upside to me. I'd be upset with that pick.
I mean, we were remiss in not talking about quarterback because, I know that all of us are sort of the mindset of not, reaching or perhaps not even drafting an early quarterback in this class. But I guess before we get to the final word, we probably should continue along this line for a second. Here's what I'll say about Desmond Ritter. I think that he has as good a potential as anybody in this class to be a serviceable quarterback. In other words, I think he's got a pretty high floor for relative to the other guys in the class that are in the big names. And he's younger than some of them are, and he's got a little bit better size than some of them do. So you can see him being kind of like a safe consensus pick. But this, I agree with you 100%. Of this thing with the throwing motion is a big factor. He had a hitch up until this year. He worked on it and tried to get rid of the sort of the wasted motion in his throwing motion. It is most noticeable when he has to drive the ball to the middle of the field, and that is the place where he's probably the most inaccurate. Now, he has adjusted a little bit, and you can tell whenever he's got it all going right, and he's got time, he's better at making that throw this last season than he was before that. But when things got sort of klefooey and the pressure was in his face, he reverted back to kind of the problem that he had. So that made him telegraph throws, gets a lot of throws knocked down, makes him inaccurate, makes him at risk to get picked. Those are all really, really, really bad things. But I just feel like he doesn't. You can see in the game against Georgia where he just didn't really feel like he could make throws into tight windows, that he could try to make a play, even though they desperately needed him to do something, to take a risk, even, in that game. So I just feel like that's one of those things when you're really under pressure and the game gets tighter and crazier. If you're a quarterback, you have to step up, and it concerned me a lot that he didn't do that. Jeremy, either you can continue on Desmond Ritter, or we can talk about some of the other names that have been attached to the Steelers.
You guys hit on Ritter pretty well, so I won't add any more there. I feel like you guys kind of summed up both my thoughts. I've got concerns about him as a long-term answer. I mean, the guy that I really like, and I've caught a little bit of flack for this, is I really like Matt Corral. And it's because I think he's got tools, and I think he's going to continue to get better. 2 years ago when he first came to Ole Miss, it was, oh my God, you're going to throw everything because you just think you can get it from A to B, and it doesn't matter who's there and if the guy's going to make the play on the ball or not. And then he had that game against Arkansas where he threw 4 picks or something like that. I was just like, good Lord, Matt, what the hell are you seeing out there? And then he comes back this year, cuts down the interceptions drastically. I feel like he was even more comfortable in year 2. But he just has little qualities that I don't see in some of the other quarterbacks. He displays some touch on the intermediate throws. He can loft that ball to the back corner where some of these guys are more rainbow throw or 2-line drive-ish. I just see little things in his game where it's like, man, if he can sit for a year and learn behind someone, I think he could really end up excelling because he moves really well. He's very mobile. He can run with the ball, and he also plays a lot bigger than his size. That's going to get beat out of him a little bit in the NFL. He can't do that constantly in the NFL, or else he's not going to be there that long. But he's got a big arm. He's not afraid to try to fit the ball into certain windows, and I really like his confidence. I think that's huge for a quarterback. Like you said with Ritter, he was a little too hesitant to try to fit balls into windows. At least with Matt Corral, I know he's willing to do that, and then there are things he can get better on. His deep ball didn't look great this year. When it doesn't, it's because he's not stepping into his throws. He's not set the way he should. So there are definitely things to work there, but he's got all these tools that make me think he's going to end up being the best quarterback out of this class. And dare I say it, he's got a little Brett Favre to him, and I can dig it.
Yeah. I mean, he's a fun college quarterback, and I do think he got better as his career went on. But my problem is really that he's running an offense where it's a little like trying to evaluate Bailey Zappi. It's like everybody's wide open, and the offensive scheme is just getting you like guys running free. And yes, there's some skill to it to be able to hit those guys and find them and take off and run when you need to. And he's, I think Matt Corral's a great runner. I like his sort of leadership style and kind of who he is as a quarterback. I love all of that. But yeah, I think this sort of middle of the field play makes me think that his upside is a sort of, this in the style of Lamar Jackson, but not quite as dynamic a player. It's not as scary for teams to defend. So I'm not sure I'm really down that path, but could he be the best quarterback in this class? Yeah. I think that opportunity is pretty open. And I mean, I'd be remiss. I've been I really liked Malik Willis, going based on his one season starting in 2020. I would go as far as to say there's a guy that had every kind of tool you could have, had a really great season, and I thought was at the top of my watch list going into 2021. His 2021 was so poor in many respects that it turned me off of him a little bit. I could still see that there's some upside, but I'm not, I just can't see he's going to go top 5 or top 10 in this class. And I just, that's too rich for me on a player like that. You guys can chip in about him if you want, but I'm just going to take a second and talk about Cole Kelly, because we're here with the guy that actually knows Cole Kelly, talking to and me talking as the person who probably, I was probably the first person not associated with the program or his family to go on, online platforms and be talking about how there was this guy that we should be talking about in this class that we're not talking about enough. And what I'll say, I'll use him as a comparison to Matt Corral, which is, I think, the offense that Southeastern is playing in is an NFL style offense. I mean, their head coach who put that offense together is an offensive coach in the NFL. And it just feels like it's way more sophisticated in what the ask is. And the other thing is, a lot of these quarterbacks that are successful and in this draft class seen very highly, it's like they had some really great receivers that were dominant in terms of how many targets they got and how many receptions they got. The thing about Southeastern is it was like waves of guys. I mean, I would have a hard time naming all of the guys who caught touchdowns and who looked great doing it. So on one hand, yeah, he had a lot of depth to throw to, but on the other hand, it's not like he's always looking for some guy that's the guy. Like 2020, it was Austin Mitchell. Last year, it was I don't know, Nolan Given or like other people. Like
Nolan Gage. I mean, there were probably, we had different number ones every week.
Yeah. So the point is, I feel like what that tells me is that the quarterback is the thing that he's running a good offense and he's making the plays he needs to make to distribute the ball around. I don't know that like superstardom is in his future. He's a little bit overage, so it's kind of like if it takes time to develop him as a player, that'll work against him, right? But I feel like in a way, he's the most ready. He could show up in a camp and not embarrass himself, which is why he was able to go to all-star games and look totally comfortable with a new cast of players in a completely different, offensive mindset and still be pretty successful with it. So anyway, I'll give you the last Cole Kelly word because you're somebody that knows him and you probably hate him. So that's another problem.
So yeah, probably one of the most biased people you could ever bring on. But when I say he's a gamer, every single big game, La Tech, UIW, Sam Houston, these are games where he had nickels, insane performances, clutch drives. He was – I don't have the stats. I'm sure PFF does. 3rd and longs, he converted at an unreal percentage. Absolutely unreal. And that's translatable. Finding guys at the sticks over the middle is a very translatable trait. So, I'm very biased, but I got a snap for him. So I'm looking at every 3rd down and I'm ready to snap him. We're just boom, 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 3rd and 15, 3rd and 18, 3rd and 9. It's just like clockwork. He's one of those guys who just shows up in the big moments. Yeah,
I don't know. I know one thing that there were 2 things that he was statistically the best at, if I recall correctly. Red zone drives resulting in touchdowns. At one time, they had 21 of 22 or something to start the season, you guys, this year, which is
we were 52 for 53 at one point.
Yeah, and I can tell you that there were 2 absolute touchdowns that were dropped. There was the 3rd one that was called back by a penalty. It was kind of a weak call. He was kind of like, and another one that the guy caught the ball and didn't make it to the end zone. Like he was stopped at like the 6-inch line. So yeah, red zone performance, outstanding. I think that's a thing that you don't. It goes under the radar a little bit for some of these guys when you see them play. But the guys who convert in the red zone, I think, are pretty valuable. That's a valuable trait to have. And then the other one was, as a runner, on 3rd and longs, 3rd and medium, 3rd and long, he was more successful picking up those as a runner than anybody. He might have been the most successful runner, running back or quarterback at converting 3rd and medium or long on runs because, I wouldn't want to tackle him. I'm like all gung ho. I know when I was a football player, I was willing to do whatever it took to do. But, you got like a 260, 70 pound guy barreling at you in the secondary. Not a good look.
He hurdled a guy against University of North Alabama. cleared over the safety.
I know that clip. I've seen that clip.
Yeah, and then if he doesn't jump over you, he's like carrying 5 guys like like Bam Bam, in the Flintstones. So anyway, we've raved enough, but yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, and I would not feel bad at all about. I'd be in favor of spending a late round pick on a guy like that. I just don't know how late, because of the price, because of the market for quarterbacks in this draft class. I'm just not sure that even the guys we think of late round picks or undrafted players, they may end up going earlier for teams that feel like they needed somebody, right? So in this case, I feel like it's possible that he goes a couple of rounds earlier than we thought he was going to go, which makes him maybe a 3rd or 4th round pick. Or even rumor has it 4 to 6 is the range. Rumor has it. I just mean, a month ago people thought Malik Willis was going to go in 30s, and now I think he's going to go 5 to 10. It's just like when teams got to look at what the quarterbacks in this draft class really looked like next to each other, throwing the ball, and at their maybe at their all-star games or pro days. I think suddenly there's fewer and fewer guys that we think we can actually draft. So yeah, the teams that are in, I think, are going to be really in. The teams that are not in wouldn't draft him. But like I said, I feel like 4 at the outside. So if he makes it into round 5, I would be really surprised. Steelers, unfortunately for them, have a big gap in their picks between their 4th round pick, late 4th round pick, and pick 208 in the 6th round. It's like 100 picks or something crazy. So that's not a good scene for trying to pick up some of those players that have fallen out of that top 100. Anyway, okay, now it's time for your last word. Corey, I'll give you, if you have another one, that's it. Great. We'll wrap this thing up and get you out of here.
Nope. I think that's good. I appreciated you having me on.
Excellent. Well, we're going to do it again, I think. My aspiration is that, you are a regular. So we'll see how much time you have. I understand there's a media demand for you. I talked with someone the other day that you don't even know who said I could get him media opportunities if that's what he's interested in. I was like, I don't know, I'll have to ask. So
something to think about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we all need about 5 things. Like, there isn't about finding one thing for your career. It's like having 5 or 6 things, maybe, the way the world works now. Jeremy Kohlman, how about you for your final word?
I would really prefer if the Steelers focus on building out this roster than having a quarterback sit and not do anything this year. I think they're in a position to where they can really round out this roster, address some of the more glaring needs, that we've touched on. I would rather us just go draft a quarterback when we feel like we absolutely need to go up and draft a quarterback. Build out the roster, get some more weapons for the future, focus on getting a franchise guy when we're absolutely sold on someone. But that's the real question. Are we absolutely sold on someone?
Yeah. Good question. Yeah. For me, I think there's only 3 reasons to draft a quarterback in the NFL draft. The third one is if you're on day 3 and you need a backup because you don't have enough quality backups, or there's somebody that's like a total developmental project, but you think is worth putting some time into. That's in the third. That's number 3. Number 2 is you are really sold on a guy because you think he has elite upside, regardless of where he is in his development cycle. You think he can be Brett Favre or Patrick Mahomes or Ben Roethlisberger or Andrew Luck, kind of a quarterback. Whatever it takes, no matter who you have playing a quarterback for you now, always worth considering drafting that player. And the third one is you have everything else in place. And you really, only thing you're missing is a quarterback. Then I think you draft a quarterback and you keep drafting them until you find the one that you need. And even if you draft 2 at a time, I'd be fine with that, right? But if you're not in one of those 3 situations, which I don't think the Steelers, at least they're not in the first 2 this year, then I feel like it really ought to be a year where you focus on building those other things so that when the right quarterback comes along, like next year's draft class, where it's the equivalent of the edge class this year, where you're going to have, no matter who comes out, I think you're still going to have 5 or 6 elite guys in the first round next year. So feels like if you want to get one next year, you're going to be able to get one. So anyway, so my final word is, I'm with you. Let's build it up. Let's bring in somebody, let's set the table so that the person who comes in next year can have what Ben Roethlisberger had in 2004. He had a team that was pretty much ready for him to come in and do something with it, or at least closer than where we are right now. Anyway, Jeremy Kohlman from the Extra Point. Your show is available. Tell us on Facebook.
Yeah, we've got a Facebook page, and then we post it on Twitter. We are working on getting it out to Spotify and on Apple Podcasts.
Awesome. And Corey, I think your show currently is
Steelers
Fury podcast. I think you might be a guest soon also on Old School, New School Football. So and the media opportunities are going to start rolling in for you. So anyway, you're you seem to be kind of like you're working on your surfer look right now. So we may have to get you a surfer background for your room so that it looks like the ocean, which Orlando doesn't have one. That's the problem.
Only about an hour away.
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you for being with us. And gentlemen, look forward to hearing your thoughts once we draft somebody in this draft. But appreciate your thoughts ahead of time too. So thank you very much on behalf of everybody. I am your host, Wil Masisak, also known as Accidental Zen on Twitter, maybe even known as Bradshaw to Ben on SteelerToFury.com. Thank you for joining us. And don't forget, there'll be more episodes all this week. We'll come back with a new episode of the Steeler Fury pre-draft extravaganza coming up right after this at a station near you, every place where podcasts can be found. In the meantime, go get them, Steelers.
Steeler Fury.